What's up, world? This is Real Talk about real business, a podcast featuring a different guest each episode. Join me as we are given the opportunity to hear their story, the battles they face, the obstacles they've overcome, the losses they've incurred, the lessons they've learned, the memories they've made, the lives they've touched, the wins they've had, the opportunities yet to present themselves. Who am I? My name is Mason, and for the past decade, I've been grinding and hustling on a level you would understand. I've sold everything, from candy bars to big screens. I own the #1 electronics store in Las Vegas called Best Deal in Town. It's been my primary focus and my pride and joy for the last 6 years. It's given me opportunities I never would have thought it was possible. It's introduced me to people I never thought I would know. I don't have all the answers. In fact, I have very, very few. But what I do have are a ton of questions. And that's my story. Join me as we talk with real people who have really done it, with real hardships and real success. Despite all the odds, despite all the naysayers, all the constant negativity, and the ever-mounting uncertainty that we are faced with every single day. This is their story on Real Talk.
For you today. Today we're joined by one of my newest friends. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the game, from everyone from MasterCard to Hershey's. He's the host of an awesome podcast, one of which I personally listen to. It's called Awakened Nation. He's owned many businesses in his life, and he's even taken one public via the NASDAQ. Not only is he an internationally recognized keynote speaker, but he's also a published international author of the book Liquid Leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Szollose.
Mason, thank you for having me on. Sometimes when people read the bio, I'm like, who the hell is that guy?
I was also going to give you the longest list of accolades as well.
Wow,
so I think you're the most decorated guest we've had thus far.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
And I mean, you're like a professional speaker. I mean, this is like what you do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one, thanks for joining us. Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now in your current status. Tell us a little bit how maybe me and you crossed paths, and then let's dig into how you got here and your kind of journey to how we're sitting here today.
How long do we have?
True story, right? Our first conversation that we ever had was like hours long, and we didn't even it was like.
Yeah, we were at Savor Coffee Shop, and Mike was sitting there, and all of a sudden we just started talking, and it was like, whoa, an hour just went by.
Yeah. So tell us what you're doing now.
Right now, I'm actually in transition. I'm creating a new brand and basically a new product where I have decided I'm going to help entrepreneurs get some coaching, get some consulting, get some help with creating a brand online, also how to navigate the business world in this day and age. And it really started out by accident because I had a lot of these thought leaders calling me up. I had doctors, CEOs, I had people who were pilots. I have a guy who has a Christian rock band, and they wanted me to write their book. They were on the road, they're flying. Like one guy, he flies during the day, and he's a rock star at night. He has a Christian rock band.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, so he flies jets, and he's a hell of a pilot. And he just goes, hey, could you write my book? So a friend of mine, she does New York Times bestsellers. So we got together and we're like, okay, let's put his book together. And we have to name it and all this, and we're going to get him out on podcasts, and we're going to get him out into the world.
That's awesome.
But I started to realize like there's a niche for a lot of people, especially boomers, who have a second act in their life. Like they've done the job, they've made the money, they're kind of sitting there and they go, I want to be an entrepreneur. And you know as well as I do that just because you say it doesn't mean you can be it.
I want to be a professional hockey player.
There you go. Exactly. So how are your legs? How are your teeth? Yeah. Are those your original teeth? Well, get ready. They're going to be going. And by the way, we've been rooting
we started off too hot, you know.
Yeah.
Like the bar was set so high.
Yeah, we're losing now, so we're not happy. So, but anyways, getting back to this, I started to realize I was sitting with a friend of mine, Donna St. Louis, and if you know anybody who is just crushing it as a business coach, a keynote speaker, things like that, it's Donna. Donna, she works with billionaires. Like, they get her in a room and they pay her a hell of a lot of money, like a minimum of $100,000 a year, to show them how to pitch specifically to venture capitalists and people where they can get investment cash. So I flew into Florida and we sat down, and I wanted her to help me navigate where I'm going. And this is a lesson I've learned. If you want somebody to coach you, make sure that they have a coach, because a lot of people, you know, they just want to get a coach, and that person can get a little arrogant and think they're hot stuff, and the latest stuff is coming up and they don't know about it.
It's so fun. And I had a professional bodybuilder on here who also does coaching, and I was like, and he was telling me, he's like, I have a coach. And I was like, you have a coach? Like, he was like, coaches need coaches. He said it too, and then I think that goes on all levels of things, right? It holds you accountable. The coach needs to be held accountable. Right?
Exactly. As good as I might be, and at the level I might be, there's somebody above me, and I'm willing to work with them. And this was Donna, and so we sat down at her kitchen table, and she's watching me work. And I don't know if you know this, Mason, but you probably developed a method through the years, or you decided this is how I'm going to approach things.
Absolutely, yeah.
But we're inside our bodies, and we don't realize other people may not be doing it that way. And Donna looked at me after a couple of days of this, and she goes, wow, you like are always at 100%. I said, well, why wouldn't I be? Because everything she threw at me, I took it, and I beat it up, and I try to make it better.
Because that's your process.
My process as a creative director, as a graphic designer, as a business person is, okay, that's a great idea, but can we make it better?
Let me tinker.
Right, tinker, make it better, push it. Maybe I do come back to that original idea, and I sit there and I go, all right, that was good, but I have to, there's something in me that has to do it. So she goes, you're always leveling up, is what she said. I said, what do you mean by that? She goes, why did you write a book and get it published in 2011? Why did you go get a black belt in 2014? Why did you do that 5-year process to do that? Why did you do, and on and on and on. She went through a list of stuff, and I go, I didn't know. I guess that's how I was raised. My dad said, either you give it 100%, or you don't do it at all. Like Yoda said, there is no try. There is either do or do not, and that's me.
My dad used to say, do it right the first time, you don't have to do it again.
Exactly.
It's the same idea.
Right. And I started to realize, as Donna was saying this, she goes, not everybody approaches life that way. And she goes, you seem to have some sort of system. So I started to step back and work on a book right now that will have the 52 secrets to unlocking your entrepreneurial genius.
Another one.
Yes.
Love it.
Firestarter.
Ooh, that's a sweet name.
Yeah, and if you know anything about the tribe, if you go back in history far enough, we had the shaman in the tribe, you had the cook, you had the hunters, you had the warriors, and you had the fire starter.
I did not know this, but it makes sense, right?
Nobody knew what to do with fire, so they had to study the mystery of fire. And so the mystery of fire was technology. That's where you got the samurai sword from. That's where you got your cooking. That's where you got pastries from. The combustion engine is 1,000 little micro explosions to make the pistons turn. So the fire starter engaged in keeping the tribe together. It was safety at night, and it was conversation. And so Doc Searles, who was one of the contributing authors to the book, The Clue Train Manifesto, he said, where there's conversation, there is fire. And the fire starter was the person who brought that light to the tribe, protected us from the darkness, got us to sit around and talk to each other, and would start a movement. Well, guess what? Every entrepreneur in this world is a fire starter. So how do you fan that flame? How do you explode that? How do you get other people excited about that? And so the subtitle is basically 52 Secrets to Unlocking Your Entrepreneurial Genius.
That's such a cool parallel to draw there. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so I started to just the first thing I did is I laid down the 52 principles I live by, and they're just starting to take form because you have to analyze yourself. What makes me tick? And then I've broken it down into like 6 areas basically. And I've asked some of my good friends who are successful entrepreneurs on television doing this stuff, I asked them to contribute. A good friend of mine, he's a resident here in Las Vegas, Stefan Chouanier. He was a gymnast, almost like he was a gold medal gymnast, internationally known. He came out here and he started like almost 20 years ago. He was in Zumanity for Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
So he's one of the top athletes in the world, male model, all this. And so I sat down and he has a process. I mean, if you want to talk about nutrition and health, and creativity, this guy has a process. I asked him to write a chapter. Okay, so he's working on that right now. I asked my friend Sarah Gabriella. She actually grew up in Las Vegas. She now lives in San Francisco. She's worked in Hollywood. She's been on film. She's done production, documentaries, interviews. And I wanted to know her process. What makes you tick? So each author is a guest and gets a shot in each of the categories.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then I have all the other, the remaining 48 or so, 46 chapters, where I go through basic things like anger. You got to channel your anger. Being an entrepreneur can be frustrating as hell, man, because you can build something beautiful and then it's not engaged by everybody else. Or you have a happy accident and all of a sudden you're like, damn, why did that sell? Why did that marketing tool take off? What? Why? You were trying to figure out.
Like the why, because you need to know the why.
Right. And the matrix that makes it work. But you were talking about me being a keynote speaker earlier. One of my favorite stories to always tell was Reed Hastings went to return The Right Stuff, the movie.
And Reed is the CEO of Netflix, right?
Yes, exactly. So he didn't start Netflix. He had actually sold one of his first tech companies for like $320 million. The guy had money.
He was already set. He was financially.
Yeah. He has a degree in engineering. This guy is smart. He's a sharp cookie. And by the way, 99% of entrepreneurs do not have college degrees, but the 1% that do, they're almost always engineers. That's the weirdest part.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
They like how things work, right?
Right. They like to break things down.
I think if you were to send an entrepreneur to college, he would probably end up in some sort of...
I'll tell you a story about that.
About
going to college. So Reed, he starts taking his VHS tape back, and he was late. And back then, a lot of people don't realize you paid a late fee because, like for me, I lived in Queens at the time, in New York City, and so I'm like trying to get home on time, and I never quite made it home. And they would close at 7, 8 o'clock, and I had the kind of job, I was freelance, but I would work late sometimes. Like I didn't have to be in till 10, but I didn't leave till 6, 7 o'clock at night. So I'm rushing, from the subway.
I remember that being a kid. Like my mom was like, in the morning, we had to take him on the way to school. I forgot about that panic of like, the late fees.
And it was only like $1, but it was sort of like, that was a lot of money back then.
But still, nobody wants to pay a fee.
Right.
An avoidable one.
So Reed Hastings returns The Right Stuff, and he gets charged like $40, $50 or whatever, which in today's money would be about $120. So I'd be pissed too.
Yeah.
So this was such a thing at the time. Congress actually called in Blockbuster and some of the Video Emporium and all these. They had to come in and testify before Congress. What can you do about late fees? Well, this was like residual income. They weren't going to give it up. They're just sitting there going, what do you want us to do about it?
Why would they?
Right, exactly. It was $1 billion industry at a time when nobody knew what $1 billion industry looked like.
There were no Amazon.
Right.
There were
right.
Microsoft wasn't as big.
Right.
Apple.
We didn't have Wi-Fi.
What's an iPhone?
Yeah. So I remember when I first portable phone back then, and I say portable phone, it was the size of a brick wrapped in leather. It was Nokia.
Yeah.
So,
did you have a suitcase phone?
Yeah. No. My friends and my dad did. They were all doctors and lawyers, so they had the suitcase phone.
Those were classy.
Oh man. But we're going back in time because I want everybody to understand just how quickly all this exploded, and it relates to business. We'll talk about this later. But what happened is Reed takes it back. He gets so pissed off that it costs $40 to return this. He turns around and starts Netflix. in 1997. And I was on Wall Street in 1997. I had just taken my company public, K2 Design.
K2.
Yeah, and we were designing websites for, we did the Gary Kasparov Chess Challenge. We built some sites for AOL. I mean, we were it. You know, we were in Crane's Business Week, Advertising Age. We were on TV. I mean, it was a hell of a ride.
You guys were the real deal.
Yeah, and what happened is at that time, Reed starts creating Netflix, and people don't realize just how nascent and grassroots that started, because we still had VHS machines being sold in stores. I remember going to the Wiz in New York City, or Crazy Eddie's, and they had a wall of machines.
Crazy Eddie.
Where prices are insane. And living in New York, you get your Christmas shopping done, sometimes in one store. The Wiz got it. This is for the kids, DVDs, all this. And so he starts Netflix at a time when we're really like in this old technology, and he's mailing out the DVDs.
So I mean, there's been many different formats of movies and things that have come and gone. Not everything's stuck. So VHS was kind of mainstream for a second.
Yeah.
And so he was an early adopter of DVDs.
He was not only an early adopter of DVDs. This was probably going out to a lot of younger people and older people who were into technology.
What year was this?
97 he started.
Because I remember, I was probably 10 or 12, so around 2001, and I got a DVD player and one DVD for Christmas.
Wow.
And I got good Christmas presents. That was my big Christmas present.
Yeah.
That was a $300 player,
No,
so that was a big risk on his end. He to take the jump into DVDs, because
what was even bigger, we didn't have encryption, and using your credit card over the internet was like taboo.
Yeah,
Nobody wanted to do
Elon wasn't there with PayPal yet.
Nope. Yeah, we didn't have any of that. Google didn't exist at that time. We had Alta Vista as a search engine.
Didn't you buy your minutes for,
Yep.
for the internet on a disc and stuff?
You could do that. I remember when we did the Gary Kasparov Chess Challenge a month before. The very first 56K modems were rolling out from Radio Shack.
What was before that? I don't even
36K, and before that was 26K. And we were building websites for the 26K and the 36 modems. Our first website that we built was 1-800-Mattress.
Wow.
And then we moved on. We did a CD-ROM hybrid for JP Morgan Chase Bank for their annual report. Then we started doing Bell Atlantic, MCI, AOL. We were doing all the big players, because none of our websites that we helped build were under 250 grand. We rarely ever touched a product that was below that.
How do you tell us how you got into website design? Because I know a little bit of the story, and I think it's really cool, because it's how you just how do you get into not touching websites under $250,000, right?
Oh, it was crazy. It's like one of those rides that I just pinched myself that I went through it, because I'm a kid from a small town, Lebanon, Pennsylvania. I grew up shoveling snow, and my father telling me I'm an idiot every week, and going to church.
Have you ever seen that 70s show?
Yeah.
Is he Red Foreman?
Totally.
Okay.
Except Red is actually much more gentle.
Oh, okay.
So if you notice my last name, it's Hungarian. So my father was the first generation born here in the United States. My grandparents fled communist Hungary in 1921 and met in Lancaster County. That's so funny.
Oh, they left separately.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And so my grandfather was a hell of a man. I never met him. He died before I was born. But he built this motel and gas station and diner off of what used to be Route 72, before it became a superhighway, right out there at the edge of town. And he would sell these burgers to people on the way to New York City and charge, a high price. He was making good money.
Burgers?
Yeah, burgers. Because back in the day, we lived in the middle of Pennsylvania, Dutch country. Yeah. So if you went out to dinner with the family, back in those days, we're talking the 30s, 40s, and 50s, a burger could cost you $1.97 for French fries, cheeseburger, and a Coke.
You can almost get it for the same price now.
Yeah,
McDonald's.
Just gotta know where to go. So my grandfather was an entrepreneur and understood this. So he started out as a diner, and he would flip burgers. My grandmother would work the counter, and my dad, he helped out too. My dad was born during the Great Depression, so I was, raised during the Great Depression as well. So, because it was cheap. So, and this leads to the next story. People don't realize I started my first business at 16, which was Disco Enterprise, and it was with two other buddies that I went to school with. And one day, they had actually started it, and one day they said, "Hey, could you DJ, a Halloween dance?" I said, "Sure." So I get on the mic, and I'm like, "Yeah, we're gonna spin those tunes." Michael Jackson, Rapper's Delight, all that stuff was coming out at the time. And so I took over the marketing side of everything and started making flyers and then creating a light show that was portable that we could put into drop ceilings and all that stuff. And we had jury rigged everything. So I had like a foot pedal that was someone's old lamp switch on a wooden board and hooked up to a bunch of stuff.
You were a 16-year-old trying to be a special effects artist.
You got it.
Heck yeah. Jerry Rig's probably an understatement.
And at that time, it's whatever chicks like.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So we would spin records, folks. Records. We didn't have any, DVDs.
You were scratching vinyl.
You got it. And so that was my first job, and I created this really great business out of it. But people don't realize I did that because it was so hard to ask my father for a $20 bill. You would have thought I was asking for $150, or something. And it was like, "Dad, can I get $20?" And he would just like, "What the hell do you want it for?" You just go off.
Wasn't even worth it then.
Yeah. He would do everything except swear in Hungarian. He was just like, I go, "All right, I'm gonna go start a business instead." So it was like, and so especially back then in the 70s, in the late 60s, early 70s, when I came of age. I was taught how to mow the lawn at 10 years of age. We would hustle. We would sell little stuff, whatever we could find. We'd take it to school, sell it, and that's just how it was. I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur, but I realized I was surrounded by entrepreneurs. My dad, my mom had her own salon. She did people's hair. My grandfather owned a bar and a tavern. So, we picked this up through osmosis. And so I went to Pittsburgh, went to college for art and design, get to New York City, and that first, 2, 3 years, 4 years, I was making horrible money, and I'd look at my paycheck and I would really get pissed. So on the weekends, I would take a part-time job.
What were you doing?
I was a board artist, or you're a graphic designer. You start in the bullpen as a grunt, basically.
What were you doing? What?
I would do layouts for annual reports, all kinds of boring stuff.
That sounds awful.
And then, and I had been trained. I actually fell into a niche part of the graphic design industry that is for meetings. And so I was doing special effects. I was prepping artwork for special effects cameras to make a logo fly at you on the screen, animate it.
Okay, that's
fun.
Some cool tech, some really cutting edge stuff probably for its time, right?
Yeah, there's nothing more amazing than seeing your little bit of work here animate at you on a 60-foot screen. There's nothing more exciting.
In what year?
This is when I first went to New York City. It was 1984.
Yeah, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I was 21. Yeah, when I went to New York City.
So you picked up a side gig on the weekends?
Yeah, I was doing everything from driving auto parts truck, which I realized now I can't do this because they gave me the worst truck. It had a hole in the ceiling, and in the winter I was sitting at the light and snow was coming in. And I said, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. So I started doing caricatures on the weekends.
Oh, okay. Can you still do caricatures?
Oh yeah, pretty cool. And so caricatures paid the bills. Like I was making $100 an hour doing caricature work, just going out to club. And remember, this is like 84, 86, $100 an hour. Lawyers weren't getting that.
No.
So I'd take 3 or 4 gigs over the weekend, rent a car for the whole weekend, and make like $600-700, and just be like, wow, this is great. And then the car would cost me $120. And I was just like, this is great. And I accidentally, this is a story I didn't tell you yet.
Oh, yes.
I accidentally started doing caricatures for the mob. So a friend of mine, this is the most hysterical. I got booked. I had an agent who would book me. And I had to go out to this place on Long Island. And it was so far out. It took me like 2 hours to get there. And then I had to walk down this road after I took the cab from the train station. And I walked into the house, and it was one of the weirdest situations I ever saw in my life. The husband was this tiny man, and his wife was big, like a very big woman. And I'm not knocking anybody like this, but they were such opposites. Right, and they were so in love with each other. It was the funniest thing. But his house had been in Architectural Digest. Like, you walked in and went, we were talking 20-foot ceilings, a fireplace hanging in the middle of 2 living rooms, and then I'd go outside. This is the crazy part. I'd go outside, and he had a pool that you swam up to a bar in. Now, a lot of you are sitting there, yeah, big deal, whatever. No. You don't understand. In that day and age, that was rare to see that kind of money.
I'm saying there's probably a man bar too.
Oh,
it wasn't just.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
And 2 tennis courts out back. One was grass and one was clay.
Well, yeah, only poor people have one tennis court.
Right, exactly. So I'm just with my jaw dropping, and they were great. We had their guests came. I drew everybody. I had fun. And this one guy, he's sitting there, Jimmy Cabaretti is his name, and he goes, he's passed, so I can use his name.
Sure.
But he says, hey, I can use a guy like you in my entourage. And I'm a little naive, I'm from a small town. He goes, do you know what a junketeer is? I go, no, what's that? He goes, when high rollers come into Atlantic City, we're talking guys who drop 40 grand minimum. I take care of them. Like, they get the room comped, I send their wives out on a shopping spree, I get them limos. If they want something questionable at 2 o'clock in the morning, I get it. I'd like you to join me in Atlantic City. So he tells me this.
Hats off to the accent.
Thank you. Living in New York, you pick it up after a while. Hey, doing? Hey, Mason. I've seen things. So here's what happens. I get on a bus that takes you down to Atlantic City, and they give you tokens, so that when you get there, you can gamble. So I got all my caricature equipment, I got my easel, and I'm like, hey, what's up? I'm a naive kid, I'm really young. So I get down there, he meets with me, and he takes me up to that room that you see in Godfather 2, the very top floor. I walk in, there is a party getting set up like you've never seen. They have food everywhere. And I mean, and the sun is coming in, this place is massive, and then the guests start coming in, and I just start drawing. And he told me, he goes, I can't really pay you, but you'll be taken care of, trust me. Mason, guys would come up to me, and they were clearly, working for somebody.
Sure.
And they would go, hey, I've always wanted to be a hockey player. Could you draw me as a hockey player? And don't do the nose justice. Don't so I'm drawing it, and I'm just like, oh my God, I think I'm, doing caricatures for the mob. I wasn't sure at first. But nobody gave me less than a $20 bill, $50 bill, $100 bill. I mean, they'd go, hey, thanks, you did a good job. I like what you did with my girl. Good job. And so I'm just like, wow, I'm making all this money. And then he had another guy in his entourage who drove limousine, and he was a little younger than me. He goes, he's going back to New York. Jeff is going to drive you back to your house. So I'm in this limousine all the way back.
You don't even argue with that, right? You said, yes, sir, thank you much, right?
I'm in my 20s, and I'm living the dream, baby.
Yeah.
So I have a Miami Vice dark suit on and sunglasses.
And cool. At this point, have you drawn any conclusions in your head? Are you like, I think something's going on here, or are you just, you're like, this is so much fun.
Still dumb as a stump. I'm the country boy. Hey, this is great. It's like, so when I really got it, okay, they started to have me draw caricatures at their parties in New York City. So there was this great restaurant we used to go to at 138 Mulberry Street. And I'm like, oh, Mr. Perugino ran it. So it was called Perry's. So I would do all these parties, and I would just have a great time. Okay, so one night my friends and I were all hanging out. There's like 6, 7 of us, and they go, oh, let's get some Italian food. Let's get down to Little Italy. I go, hey guys, I know a great place. They know me. We're gonna have a great time. They go, all right, Brad, we'll trust you. I'm 20 something. They're probably looking at me like he's an idiot. So I get there, and Mr. Perry is on that night. I say, hey, could we get a table for my friends? He's like that, 4 waiters run up.
Get the character kid at the table.
Right. They kick everybody out who was on the balcony in the bay window. They just move them. They're like, what the? I just said it. They're like, we don't give a shit. You know,
that's awesome.
So they get them out, and all of a sudden, they just make this giant table for me and my friends. We all get bottles of wine, comped, okay? We get 2 giant plates of lobster fra diavolo just brought out to the table. I mean, we ate, and my friends are looking at me going, Brian, what the hell do you do for these people? I go, hey, I'm not going to talk about it. So that was New York City.
At that point, things were starting to click.
Right. So one of my buddies who was with me was Doug Cleet, and he was there with his future wife, and we were hanging out. Doug and I used to go skiing together, mountain climbing, hiking, drinking buddies, basically. And I was in his wedding party. So right around 1992, right at the end, he goes, hey, I want to start a business with you. And I said, okay. He goes, I like the work you do, the design work you do with meetings and things like that. And he did these big corporate hotel chains in multiple languages, all this. So
at this time, you're still doing your graphic design for meeting stuff during the week, and on the weekends, you're working for the mob.
Yeah, and so Doug is like, and I had just gotten out of a bad business relationship. Business partners can be good and they can be bad. So Doug sat with me that night. It was around Christmas time. We were driving back home because we lived in the same neighborhood. And he goes, I want to start a business with you. And I said, Doug, I just got out of a really horrible business partnership. I said, if you can give me 3 or 4 really great reasons and take your time, give it a week or 2, I'll consider it. So he comes back a week later with a list. He must have had 50 reasons on there. I said, all right, you had me at hello. It was one of those moments. I go, all right, let's do this. So you have to remember the yuppies were a big deal back in the 90s.
What's a yuppie?
A yuppie is a young, upwardly mobile wasp, basically. It's usually a white person. They also have buppies, too, which is upwardly mobile black Americans as well. And these were people that embraced, for the first time, money, BMWs, good cars, good coffee. We see the result of that today, believe it or not, the yuppie movement, in Starbucks on every corner, and $4 and $5 coffees, and rugs from all over the world, and BMWs.
Like a hipster vibe almost?
Before hipsters.
Yeah, but like a more upscale hipster.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay.
Yuppies, you'll see them in some old TV shows, and they're usually a white guy with blonde hair and nerdy glasses.
Okay, gotcha.
Who's making $100,000 a year. My dad's generation, they're like from the Great Depression. So if my dad got a car for $5,000, he'd brag about how he got the guy down in price. Yuppies do the opposite. They go, hey, I overspent by 20% because they could. They had the money. So they was bragging, and it was just, it was so annoying. So we sat down one night in my living room, and we just made a list of all the pretentious names, and we hated every one of them. Bradley Douglas Design, that kind of snooty nonsense. So Doug's about to leave, and I said, hey, sit with these for, a couple weeks, see if you like any of them. And I turn around and I look in the corner, and Doug and I had climbed this mountain in upstate New York called Algonquin. We were about a mile up, and this was a few years earlier. And all of a sudden, Doug spreads his arms out like this, and I got this great photo. And we were always a big fan of the great climbers of the world and the different mountains. And I had a set of skis in the corner called K2s as well. And I turn around and go, hey, sit with some of these. Maybe we want to call it K2. We literally stopped and looked at each other, and chills went up our spine. And they went, it's K2. And probably the following week, we registered K2 Design at 60 Worth Street in New York City at the county clerk's office. Wow. That was 1993, and it was right around my 30th birthday. I was very adamant that I wanted to start something big by the time I hit 30. I wanted it to begin at 30. So that first year, we were struggling. And we had some great clients. We had American Express, and we had, Banco Popular.
How do you find American Express?
Well, because I'd already been in the business for 10 years, and I recommend this to almost any entrepreneur, you should be in that business for a few years so you know the ins and outs, know if you're getting screwed, know if you can get some good deals. And so we're sitting there, and so we had both had 10 years of experience. Well, I get a phone call one day from the studio I used to work with, and they said, hey, Brad, we have a client here that needs design work. It's not our type of client. We're sending it to you. I go, who is it?
American Express Publishing. And so I go,
Okay.
okay, you twisted my arm,
Send it to my secretary.
Miss Moneypenny, So I was just like, oh my God. And then Doug had some contacts in the banking industry, and Banco Popular had just fused with Banco de Ponce, making it the largest bank in the Western Hemisphere from South America all the way up to New York City. So we did all their posters and their banners and applications, all in a special kind of Spanish, which is Nuyorican. It's actually a technical term. So it's New York, Puerto Rican, is the dominant language amongst the Spanish in New York City.
There you go.
Spanish speaking. Yeah. So we actually had to hire somebody to translate it into Nuyorican. And I've actually had people go, what are you talking about? That's actually a dialect of Spanish. Yeah. So we did that. And after that first year, we were still struggling to pay the bills. And all of a sudden, Doug walks in one day with Time magazine under his arm, and he says, "We have to become an internet company." I'm making it more dramatic than it was.
So he's like, he's taking it from like pure print to this new thing.
He goes, "We have to become an internet company," and I just looked at him and go, "What the hell is the internet?" Because it's 1994, and people laugh at me sometimes when I say that. But the reality is most people thought it was email. Or they thought it was the, whatever, AOL.
It still wasn't broadly
It wasn't
understood for another decade.
It wasn't common. I mean, it literally was not commonly known. We were using 26K modems at the time, 64-bit color. And so we're sitting there, and Doug and I just, we decide we're going to do graphical user interfaces, GUIs, okay? So we just sent out a postcard. 4x6 postcard that said, "Click now to get on the World Wide Web." That sort of phrase.
The original clickbaiter here. This guy is the original clickbaiter.
I'm the bastard who created that. Spam.
On paper.
On paper, direct mail. So direct mail campaigns, if you do your research, if they do well, they get a 4% return. We got an 11% return. And all of a sudden, we had somebody knock on our door downstairs in our building who had gotten our postcard because we bought a mailing list. And it turns out he had a server farm right below us. We didn't even know.
How many server farms do you think were in America?
I didn't know
let alone right below you.
I didn't know what a server farm was, so let's start with that. Okay.
So this guy, he knocked on the door and says, "I have a server farm," and you're like, "I'm not."
We host Sierra Magazine Online and about 4 other magazines. So they brought us downstairs. They showed us what they were doing, and the interfaces were horrible. And we're like, "Yeah, we can nail this."
So for anyone who's not like super familiar, when you say interface and a GUI, like you're talking like what the front facing website where the customer sees, the pretty part, not all the coding and stuff.
No,
but you build that. To make it look pretty on the front.
Well, here's what it started to become. Instead of becoming just graphic design, it's the user experience. And so we had to do a lot of psychology analysis, thinking, will they click here? Where do I put the button? Should I put pictures of people looking at you? Because back then we were just doing graphics. Remember, it was 64-bit color. So we had this color palette, where you had to click and, it was just...
one at a time.
And in me, I just sitting there going, this is like we're going back to the Stone Age as a graphic designer, because the quality of work I was doing with special effects cameras, doing... big meetings. Right. I was just like, why the hell would anybody want to be on the internet?
So guy shows you the server farm.
Yeah.
And you're like,
what the hell is that? I just see boxes. And then he shows me on this little 13-inch screen, You
got all this computer stuff in this little bitty screen.
And let me remind your listeners and viewers, we started K2 with 2 Mac 2CIs, which were the pizza box, the box. The pizza box came later, which was the Power Mac. Excuse me. And we had 13-inch VGA tubed monitors. Think about that for a minute. Okay, that's how we started K2. And we had one plug on the other side of the room, so we were jury-rigging everything and hoping we didn't blow a fuse. And then back then, you had to daisy chain everything. So I remember 80 megabytes of RAM was $1,600, and we just could not afford that. And then one year, everything plunged in price. So the year before, that $1,600 investment in RAM was now $80. And we were like, what the hell is going on? And from that moment on, we went from working with 50 megabyte files, which we thought were huge back then, I think the last big file I worked on was about 4 terabytes. I mean, we're talking huge files now.
4 terabytes then or currently?
Currently.
Oh, I was like, you were working 4 terabytes back then? Holy,
no, not even
I didn't even know
close.
they used that word.
Well, let's put it to you this way. If you had AOL on your Mac opened up all day, it would freeze your computer. You would have a major crash. You had to boot. You had to do a hard boot 4 times a day. And by the way, AOL was created for Mac users, and then they went all graphical, and then we just couldn't handle the data.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So getting back to K2,
Yeah,
we started building websites, and this guy, his fiance was across the hall, and she came over and she says, "Hey, you got to meet my fiance. I think he could help you with this." So Dave Setner comes in on a Saturday, watches us building these interfaces. He goes, "I think I could sell this." And he volunteered to be our sales guy. We had like no money. We were just a freelance studio. And he goes, I actually made fun of him. I did my Dr. Evil impersonation. I just was like, "David, if you can get us $1 million of internet services and interfaces, I will not only make you the CEO of my company, I will make you a full partner." Well, he sold $1.4 million in 9 months of websites and interfaces. The following year, he did $4.3 million. And the year after that, he did $7.3 million. We expanded from us 3 becoming business partners to a 4th business partner, 60 employees with offices worldwide. We had an office in Dusseldorf, Germany. We had an office in Washington, D.C., and we had offices in New York City.
And it all started with a postcard.
It all started with a postcard. And the other thing that started this, and this is part of the work I'm doing today, right after we formed this alliance, because we started to do this, the interactive group, we called it at first. And Matt DeGannon came on board, and he was working in the publishing industry. We made him a partner because he had the publishing houses. But he brought to the table these MIT programmers. And so we had all these, programmers, we had designers and all this. Well, I thought, you know what? Let's get some corporate photos of us, because I figured we're gonna need them for the website.
Sure.
So I get me, David, and Doug, and I'm sitting in a chair, and the photographer I chose was a good friend of mine. So he got up on a ladder, so he was a little bit above us, took these great shots, and we look like kids. I mean, we're in our 30s. David was still in his 20s.
You still have some of those?
Yeah.
Send them to me. I'll throw them up in this.
Yeah, we have advertising age. Well, what happened is we got the photos taken. 2 weeks later, advertising age called, and they said they need photos of our work. And well, I didn't really have photos of our work, but I had Chrome. Those were big 4x5s of Kodak, slide film, big one. That's a Chrome.
Okay.
I mailed that to them, and they did this article about strange bedfellows. They call it a horrible name.
Strange bedfellows?
Yeah.
Oh, because you were the 1-800 mattress guys?
Oh, no. What happened is all these companies, they could only find 10 companies across the United States that were building websites. 10. OnRamp was out on the West Coast. We had crazy. And so we're one of the top companies listed there. And instead of our work showing up, this was a full page article in Advertising Age. Our pictures were up there prominently, almost full size of the 4x5 Chrome.
It's like the equivalent of going viral today, right?
All of a sudden, and we were right near the center of the spread, and all of a sudden, our phone rang off the hook. And we weren't prepared for it. We grew 425% for 5 straight years. I mean, we exploded.
And what people got to realize, like it's not like you're quadrupling a quadruple, and you've quadrupled that quadruple that you quadrupled. Like it's exponential.
Right. I thought I was going to lose my mind because we went from 1 or 2 employees to 60, and so we would do a hiring stint because we'd win something and then we'd get another one. And we had people from all over the world. I mean, I had programmers from India. I had a guy from Germany, because we were doing Audi's NetWriter.
How do you find that many people without the internet in such a short period of time?
Well, back then, it wasn't like you put an ad on the internet because the internet was really like nascent at that time. So we would put an ad in the New York Times. And we had a very solid hiring process. The team that needed the person, they did the hiring. Yeah, because, winners a lot of times want to work with other winners, and subconsciously you hire a winner. Okay, so once they went through 2 rounds in a hot seat, they wound up with us, the business partners. And I would always throw curveballs, and get them. So we wound up with people from all over the world who spoke multiple languages. And he's a good friend today, Vinton. He was from Jamaica, Jamaican American, came in, dreadlocks, cool as hell. He's like, hey, what's up? And we sat down, and after he went through all the rounds, and finally we were in my office, and we said, you're hired. Everybody left, and he's sitting with me, and he's like, remember, this is 95, 96. He leans in, he goes, I don't know how to build a website. And I leaned in real slow because I knew he was scared. I go, nobody does. I said, just listen to the other guys over there. Because we didn't have open source coding. We didn't have any software to do this. NetFusion eventually came out where you could build it. But Vinton he became one of our best designers, art directors who ran the department. Today, he's one of the top web designers in the world. He's just phenomenal at what he does. So these are the kind of chances we gave people who just were new to this thing called the internet. A lot of people think it just showed up.
Everybody was new, right?
Yeah, nobody knew what the hell it was. I mean, we won the JP Morgan Chase CD-ROM hybrid for their annual report, and that was a $250,000 gig. They gave it to us.
And that kind of sounds like it's office meeting design-ish, which is probably right up your alley. You're probably like...
Yeah, it was the perfect blend of interactive, animation, and because we got guys to do animation in JavaScript and all this other stuff. And once they did it, I mean, it came out. It's probably one of our best projects. It's historically, one of our best projects. And we did a lot of interactive stuff. We did the very first Gary Kasparov versus IBM Deep Blue, the computer chess match.
We beat the chess, yeah.
Yeah, we did that for 2 years in a row. And Ogilvy actually hired us to be the guys who created it. So in order to keep up with the chess and everything else and the blow-by-blow detail, we hired court stenographers to do the blow-by-blow detail every day. And we hired Russian programmers to come in because they know chess like we know baseball.
Yeah.
And the New York Times was covering this every single day.
So did you have where was this chess match at? Did you have someone there?
Yeah,
on site?
We had to physically go on site. If I remember correctly,
something?
The first one I believe was in Philadelphia. Don't quote me on that one. But our team was down there in Philadelphia, and I was up in New York City helping to create the graphics for mirrored sites because we warned IBM that first Friday. We said, hey, you need more servers than this. I think they had 4 servers. That was it. This was about to get hit with 5 million people, and they weren't ready. This set records for what we called hits back then, page views.
So for anybody who doesn't understand, everybody basically needs a room in an apartment complex on this server. You run out of rooms, things get real hairy. So you need you were like, dude, we need more buildings to put all these people in.
And they were working with Sun Microsystems.
Did they not believe you?
No, they didn't.
They were
they didn't believe us because we were kids. In their minds, we were this startup company
overshooting these kids.
And we had guys from MIT. I had employees that graduated from MIT, and I'm like, why aren't you listening to us?
You weren't saying we're going to push the limits. You're like, we are going to destroy this.
The New York Times came to our site that we built for them to do their own expose and write articles about it, so you better have it ready. And they weren't even using IBM servers. They were using Sun Microsystems servers. Okay, we had a relationship with them on Long Island.
Did IBM even make servers at that point?
Yeah, they did.
And they weren't using their own?
They weren't using them. They didn't believe it was going to be a big deal.
Was it cheaper to use Sun Microsystems than their own servers? Probably.
And I got a huge lesson on the big corporate giant not listening to you. And so we kept insisting, and that Friday they got pounded. People complained, they would get on for 30 seconds and they'd get knocked off. This was history in the making, and they weren't listening to us. And that weekend, they went and bought all these servers, put them in place, they're installing them. I get a phone call from Doug. He goes, you got to go to the office, and I need this, I need that, you need to email it. And that was a big deal. Emailing graphics at that time.
How long does that?
That took all day, okay? And we're not talking big changes. We're just talking moving a few pixels.
And you guys would be on a higher speed connection than the average person on top of that, right?
No,
you.
We had a 56K modem at the office. We didn't even have Wi-Fi yet. But what we did is we were exploding, and we were bootstrapping. So we didn't have cash to do this. We had no startup capital. So what we did is when a job we get paid for, then we would pay the employees. And we were literally biting our fingernails some days, money coming in. And IBM took 6 months to pay that final bill. I was just like tearing my hair out.
They pay when they want to. What are you gonna do?
Right. And I was the secretary and treasurer, and I literally had to call the head of their accounting department. And go, hey, Suze, what's up? Could you pay us this weekend? I sound like what's his name from Scooby Doo? Hey,
Shaggy.
Hey, could you pay us? And I was just like fit to be tied because I had all these employees to pay. So here's the best part of the story, and we'll wrap it up a little bit. I know I'm meandering a little bit.
I love it.
What happened is David comes in one day. He became our CEO. And he realized we had to compete against all these other companies that were getting financing. And we had to get out and get that financing fast.
Was this like the start of like big seed financing?
Yep.
Where like people just started...
Because they had a scribble on a napkin.
And this was like the new venture capital.
Yeah.
It was like...
This was totally it. I didn't even know what a bubble was until years later. I looked back and went, oh my God.
But in the moment, what are you thinking? Like, this is just the way things are going? This is too good to be true?
Well... I literally sat there and I said to my business partners, because two of my other partners were boomers and one was a Gen Xer.
I love that you use boomer and you're just like, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Love it.
And we were progressive boomers, so we understood the technology. And even to this day, I go into companies and I know I don't look like a boomer, but I am. And I'll go, so how does this work? Teach it to me like a 6-year-old. They explain it, and then I'm all excited. I'm like, oh, okay, so we could bounce this off the satellite and go over it. They're like, you understand this? It's like, yes, I do. But what happened is, I would go to my boomer business partners, and we would just like look around, and I would go, guys, why are we getting paid millions of dollars to build websites? It makes no sense to me. I'm sitting there riding the wave. I mean, we were just blown away by this. Why are they happening? And you could never judge people. Like we would see two guys competing against the same job with us, and they would come out, and you'd be just laughing like they don't know what they're doing. And 2 weeks later, there would be an announcement in the newspaper that they got $40 million in financing, and you're like, what?
Or someone got acquired or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like,
and then here's the weird part. Like agency.com were our like best buddies. We were literally about to go into a pitch that they were coming out of, and Kyle Shannon and I forget the other guy's name, Chansu, they ran up to us and they go, here's what you do. And they told us the strategy they used. And we were just like, wow. And so we were winning like Polygram, tapes, we were just going to MCI. We got Sprint, MCI, we got all the big players. And so we started to realize when you have this many employees, you can no longer take $50,000 jobs. You have to go for the big ones. So we were working with American Express. We were working with Microsoft. And their websites were so big, Mason, we only would get a section and get paid $200,000, $175,000 plus overages.
And you're just doing the graphics at this point.
Yeah. And integrating some of the programming. Like I said, we had a programming department, and we had a graphic design department, and they would come together and work together. We had a brainstorming process that we used at the beginning of every project to decide how we would use technology, the interface, doing an analysis, how we wanted the user to come in to increase traffic, things like this. And we would provide those other services, promotion and things like that, banner ads, all that. But I'll never forget this. David was freaking out. And it turned out David was a graduate of the Wharton School of Business, and he specialized in entrepreneurial financing. So David is just like, he's on point about everything. He predicted everything. He blew my mind when it came to sales. Like, he destroyed everything I thought I knew about sales. And so David just starts, he goes, we need to get some kind of financing because we can't keep bootstrapping. We can't keep doing it this way. And we were at the St. Denis Hotel, which was the hotel that Abraham Lincoln slept at before he went to give the Gettysburg Address. He took the train out of New York City. So it was all these tiny little Victorian era rooms. Well, we had 6 rooms in there, and we were still expanding. We had 10 to 15 employees in one room at one point. Yeah, everybody had headsets on so they could work in private. My workstation was in the middle of the hall. You know what I mean? We were expanding like that.
Yeah.
So this is what started to happen. And so David had met a guy at his wedding, Carly Berlant. And Carly basically said, hey, I take companies public. And he got us a meeting with this underwriter, Douglas and Company, up town right outside of Times Square, closer to Park Avenue on the east side. So they call us in, they sit us down, and they meet with all 4 business partners. And we literally have a 4-hour meeting, and we're shoved into this conference room with a long executive table, and there's no more room for anyone to come in. I mean, we're talking 15 to 20 people in a tiny room. And they're cranking the air conditioner because it's warm. And so they got to meet all of us. And after 4 hours, they go, thank you, we'll let you know. And we leave, and we're walking out. And Carly looks at us, and he goes, who do you think the owner was? But all my other business partners, they're like, oh, it was this guy who talked, and this guy was so impressive, and blah, blah, blah. And I kept my mouth shut. And he looks at me, and he goes, who do you think it was? And I said, it was the guy who never spoke through the whole meeting. And he goes, you're right. I said, because he had nothing to prove. He had nothing to ask. He had nothing to add. He just listened. And I was like, that dude is the owner of a multi-million-dollar underwriter. And so they called us up probably 4 days later and said, we'd love to take you public. What do you need? And we go, we want $1 million to expand because we have to move into 55 Broad Street in order to go into the New York Technology Building, which had a T3 or T4 line running up the center pipe. Okay, a lot of people don't know there's T4 lines as well.
Yeah, it is. That's like super high speed, especially for
that's beyond high speed. Yeah. That's government level.
Right.
So I stepped out of my executive duties for the day, and for the next 6 months, I designed the space. I got the moving ready, and we prepped the 6th floor at 55 Broad Street. And here's the funny part. They said, we're going to take you public in 6 months. So we had to be ready in 6 months. Well, here's the weird part. None of our vendors wanted to get paid. They wanted stock. So once again, we're back to New York City.
But I mean, is that such a bad thing for a company?
It's illegal.
Oh, is it? Okay. I've never taken a company public,
it's
so
illegal.
I don't know.
Okay,
because I'm like, heck yeah, I'd take some stock.
I know, but here I am. I have the 6th floor. There's nothing there. It's just girders and insulation spray. Okay, there's nothing in the ceiling. There's no HVAC. None of that. Right. Okay, so I'm the only business partner who can read blueprints. That's why they chose me. I had a couple of years of architectural design and drafting. Okay, so I'm sitting there, and I go to the space, and weeks are starting to go by. We're about to move in a month or two, and there's no walls up. And I'm going, what the hell's going on? So the foreman who runs everything, he comes up to me and he goes, I could get this done for you by, this amount of time, but it's going to cost you 10 grand more. And I said, well, we're about to go public. I can't really do that. And he goes, I'll tell you what, you give me some stock for the equal amount of price. I was getting tired. Like 3-4 vendors like, give us stock.
Right.
I'm like, could you? Oh, everybody wanted to get rich off of us.
But it probably wasn't their first rodeo being a vendor for a company going public, and they're like, this is how we get it.
Yeah, they get the stock, the equivalent of their price, and then our stock price shoots up, and now
they know the game.
Right. So everybody was about to go public after that. We were the first, by the way, to go public.
All right.
And so we went a month before. I think it was the Communicod companies all started going public. So finally, I had to go back to my business partners. I said, guys, we have to grease this wheel. I hate to say it, and I don't like to say this, but most unions and all that, they're sort of mob controlled.
There's a mentality there.
Well, that's New York City. It's run, and I'm not knocking it. God bless them. They're great guys. I've worked with some really great guys in the unions and stuff like that. I do support unions. I'm one of those guys, but don't screw me on price. That's all I ask. I'm very much a New Yorker about that. We're going to negotiate hard,
Absolutely.
which I did a couple of times. But this was back when these guys that were laying concrete were also being taught how to install computers.
Oh.
And I'm like, no, you're not installing my computers. And they tried to get in on this action. I said, look, I have guys from MIT here. No, you're not. No, just because you're in local 3,
right?
The electricians union. No,
and a computer then was a much more complicated setup than it is now. You're not just putting a box and plugging.
We had daisy chains going on. We had monitors. The 20-inch monitors weighed like 60 pounds.
Right.
Before we got all this funding money, and when we were starting in the beginning, there were no laptops, by the way. So our building closed on the weekend at 4:00 on Saturday. So Doug and I would put all the computer equipment, the desktops, in the car.
Did they have handles
with
sometimes?
SideQuest? No, we had no handles on those things back then. This is when Apple products looked like just IBM towers. They weren't sexy. And so we would grab these things, put them in the back seat of our car, and drive over the Williamsburg Bridge to Queens and set up at Doug's house and do projects on the weekend, driving his wife nuts. Okay, we designed the K2 logo in the middle of a dinner party she had thrown. She was pissed at both of us because we just ignored the guests and went into the corner and started designing the K2 logo, which won a design award, by the way.
Heyo.
Yeah. So, getting back to going public, we got the space taken care of. David Setner's wife worked with us, and Leslie, she coordinated the moving company. And I swear to God, after we gave that guy a $10,000 check to kind of, literally we had to do it. He had us by the cojones.
Yeah. Or have no walls.
Yeah. And we did patch panels, and we did digital and Ethernet kind of lines plus electric.
Okay.
And we ran those panels through the walls before the walls were built. So we had everything controlled the way we wanted it. And then I left the ceilings raw, and then we had 4 executive offices. We had a big conference room. I had all this built, 3,000 square feet. Everybody moved in. We had a big common area where our executive producers could sit and things like that. And we moved in like right around May into June. And then we got settled in. Everybody got used to the new space. We kept working. We had, this will tell you how crazy it was. In order to get a T1 line, we were working with MCI at the time, which later was Sprint. They tried to get into the building. Well, the building was a 9X union building, so they wouldn't let him cross the line. So it took us months to get a T1 modem put in for our patch panel. And the patch panel is a tower, which basically you take your Ethernet cable and you connect it to the room number that you want that to go through.
Direct, yeah.
And so when an employee would move, we just move the patch panel. That's all we had to do. And so it just made it really easy. One of our IT guys helped me set that idea up. I didn't know anything about it. He did. And so, literally after we moved in, I hear gunshots one night. I didn't know anybody else was still in the office. I opened the door. I walked down. It was my buddy John Balisari. He was doing some programming. He was playing Doom on a high-speed connection because nobody had a high-speed connection.
I bet he was unreal, huh?
And I go, what the hell are you doing here? He goes, I didn't think anybody was here. He had the sound up all the way. He's like, like this. And I go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm playing Doom with these guys in France, and I'm kicking their ass because I'm on a T1.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
It's like, you bastard. I said, well, go do what you got to do.
Hell
I knew it wasn't real gunfire.
Right.
I grew up in Pennsylvania. I know what a gunshot, but it was just John. To this day, I'll tease John. I go, you SOB. It's in my book, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome.
Liquid Leadership. But I talk about that, that sort of mentality. And then one of the biggest amazing things is when we went public, it was July 26th, 1996. And the excitement that was in us was just astounding. And me and my partners, we went down. We knew at 11 o'clock in the morning we were about to show up on NASDAQ's ticker symbol. And we weren't just there. We were going to be, I think we were listed also in the New York Stock Exchange, but I know we were listed on the European Stock Exchange as well. So we decided to go to Harry's of Hanover Square, which is the oldest bar restaurant in New York City.
Sounds fancy.
Yeah, well, what it is it's down on Wall Street, and it's where most of the biggest deals in the world have taken place on Wall Street.
Okay.
They go to Harry's at Hanover Square. It's so old, I actually believe George Washington went to the original building.
Snap. Okay. All right.
So we went in there. The bar kind of wrapped around. They had all the ticker symbols up on the wall, and all the latest, financial news was up there. And we all ordered scotch, and we waited. And 11 o'clock, I don't drink in the morning, but this day I made an exception. And when our ticker symbol came up, we just went, "Gentlemen, we are now public." Clicked our drinks, and then David looked at us. He goes, "Now the work begins," and we were exhausted at that point.
Right, yeah, I can only imagine.
So that weekend, we took the wives out to dinner. We got a limousine, and I suggested we go to the Top of the Sixes, which was one of the best restaurants in New York City, at 54th and 5th Avenue, 666 5th Avenue. Went to the top, and I had lobster in croissant pastry. It was just delicious with an apricot sauce. I remember what we ordered.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
And then we went over to the we went to the big hotel right there. I'm losing my mind a little bit. There in right by the park in New York City.
You're asking the wrong guy.
Yeah.
I've never been in New York.
It was the park, the Park Hotel.
Oh, sure.
And so we went to the bar in the very back, and Frankie Avalon walked in that night. the famous singer.
Yeah.
And he was there, and we got a table, and we just started smoking cigars and ordering scotch. And I have pictures of that on Facebook.
We'll put that here.
I was literally, I mean, Mason, it's the funniest thing. I have always looked young my whole life, and I look back on this picture, and I'm 33 years old, I think, and I look like a child, and I think to myself, who in the hell would give this guy money? Because it's just a joke. I'm so wet behind the ears. I didn't even shave once a week back then. I have the baby face, and I was just
That's all. Yeah.
sitting there smoking a cigar, going, "Yeah,
Like,
we're gonna do my way, kid." And that was from a famous cartoon where he smoked the cigar. He's just like. But yeah, that was the meteoric rise, and then we just started getting bigger and bigger accounts, and this is where I discovered the power of the media. Right after that, advertising age, when they did our pictures, we exploded.
Yeah.
Well, I started to get us in bigger publications, and at one point I was in a French publication where the title was "The Nouveau Riche, the Kings of Wall Street."
Oh, oui.
Yeah, and so that was a full-page article in what is the equivalent of the New York Times in France. And so I couldn't believe if you appeared in an article, the phone rang. If you appeared on TV, the phone rang. And so I use that today with my clients. It's like, you want to be famous, you have to monetize fame. Right now we're in a day and age on social media where people are like, "Look at me." And it's like, yeah, that's great. Who cares? I have to drive business your way by understanding it, the matrix of what's going to make your clients reach out and call you. So we have to get very clear on what you do. So for me, I've been in the media for, almost 25, 30 years now. So I've been in Forbes magazine 6 times. And by the way, not just the online publications, I've been in the print version. Yeah. So I've been in New York Magazine. I've been in Crane's Business Week. I've been in Advertising Age. Inc. magazine quotes me a lot because I'm known for a couple of quotes. I don't even interview with them. They just find a quote and plaster it in there.
Well, because you do. So maybe this would be a good time to transition to your speaking career, right? So this led you all this experience. A publicly traded company gave you the. So real quick, wrap us up on how you exited the company. So it kept growing, and how did you leave, and then what did you do for your next step?
At one point, our underwriter kind of got on our case, you need to make more profit, and they don't realize that graphic design is labor intensive, programming and graphic design, because we didn't have software back then. So one of us had to leave, and so I volunteered, and I was burnt out. And Mason, I'm telling you, 95-hour work weeks for 5 to 7 straight years. I mean, I was so sick and didn't know it. I went to a naturopathic doctor after that because I was at the gym and I was trying to lift weights. And it usually takes me about 2 weeks to get back into good shape. I was having trouble lifting 30-pound dumbbells, okay? That's a disgrace for me. Yeah, and so my left arm wasn't doing it. So my wife at the time, she hooked me up with this guy from East Africa, and he had studied to be a surgeon, and he was a master herbalist and studied reflexology, iridology, and also acupuncture.
Okay.
So he analyzes me, and he looks at me. This is like 97, 98. And he goes, I have good news and bad news, my friend.
That's never a good thing, you know?
So he had known me for years, and I was joking. My wife being black and him being black, we always had a good conversation.
Sure, I can imagine.
So he would always say, you give me hope for America, you know. So I was sitting there, and he goes, good news and bad news. And I said, all right, Iwan. His name was Iran Josan. So Iran, he goes, you want the good news or the bad news first? I said, bad news always. First. Always. And he goes, you have the internal organs of an 86-year-old man.
It's not good.
I was like, how the hell did that happen? He goes, stress. He said, stress is the killer. He goes, the good news is I can reverse it. And that's when I learned that you can cure any disease and reverse aging if you know what to do. And that's part of the reason why I'm almost 60.
Really?
Look, yeah.
I would not have guessed that.
In a year and a half. And I don't look that. I also am physically exactly what you think you see. I can do stuff that a lot of people my age can't come close to.
You could probably do a lot of stuff that people my age can't do, honestly.
Right. And I trained in jiu-jitsu at a time when people were just like, you're how old? You know, I started training at 45 and did 10 belt tests, got my black belt in a 4-hour test. And, shout out to all my senseis and masters who trained me. They were just...
Getting a black belt's no joke.
Oh, no.
Anyone with a black belt, they don't hand those out.
Well, my sensei was Charlie Raymond, Master Charles Raymond. And after he hit a 5th and 6th degree black belt, he still went and trained. He went to Matt Serra's training camp on Long Island and started to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and brought it back to the dojo. And these guys are no joke. You have to earn your belt in the ring. So they're really fighting. So Charlie, there were a couple of us that were a little older. Like one of my friends, he was probably just hit his 40s. I was getting closer to 50 as I got close to the black belt. And our pride was, and this is Victory Martial Arts is the name of the school, and there's a chain of them. There's like 3 or 4 of them in Long Island. But we had started with Grandmaster Fred Villari, and when Fred Villari started going down this weird road where if you practice everything on video, I'll give you a black belt, and we're like, no, we're out of this system. And what Charlie and Master Snowball did is they brought real fighting techniques to the dojo. They had this attitude if you're a white belt, I don't want you walking out here without knowing how to defend yourself. So we were also a teaching school. So the black belt, you got to work with black belts, purple belts, it didn't matter. We would rotate. And if you did something incorrectly, you were told, hey, try it this way, do it this way. So from day one, we would do ball kicks from one end of the dojo to the other, and if you didn't move your opponent who had a kick bag in front of you, you couldn't move forward. You had to kick hard enough for 40 feet and then switch legs and kick them back. So if you didn't do that, you don't pass. Okay, sure. So our school went from Shaolin, Kempo, which is Kung Fu, and Kempo Karate. Charlie Parker School of Kempo, which fought Bruce Lee.
Is that Steven Seagal?
No, he's Aikido.
Aikido.
Charlie Parker, who beat Bruce Lee, bless you. If you've ever watched the miniseries, Charlie Parker actually used some of the techniques that Bruce Lee had developed against him. So Kempo is a little bit like Wing Chun, but it's nastier. It's multiple strikes, super fast, rip the ears off, poke the eyes, break the arm. It's not pretty karate. It's if you ever want to get into a fight inside a phone booth, Kempo is what you want to know. It's close combat, quick strikes.
I'm glad they don't phone booths anymore because I'd get beat up at that.
It's like boom, elbows, boom. We're also masters of the low kick. The low kick is meant to destroy the ankle, the knee.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Shins, yeah.
You see a lot of that coming in the UFC now. A lot of guys attacking that stuff now.
That's Kempo. My favorite move in the ring was to step to the right and use my left leg to sweep his ankle out from under him, and then come back with a right cross to the jaw. And so, like, he was like trying to get his balance as I come back in.
My favorite move is to run really fast.
And there's a part of me that's the Irish gene on my mom's side. I like a good fight. So my senseis all felt that, all this nonsense that Kung Fu does, unless you're fighting with Wing Chun, is a lot of these traditional movements that don't translate anymore into the street. Kempo is really street fighting technique is really what it is.
Which is, if you're going to be in a fight, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, because one guy, the only time a guy is going to get in your face is if he's bigger than you or he's smaller and has an attitude. He's angry. Man, you're angry for a 4'10" guy.
No one's like, hey, let's go down to the dojo real quick and settle this. You sell it right there.
Yeah, you take your shoes off and that's not happening. So it's usually going to be 3 to 4 guys. And so that's where Kempo comes in. It's really the most devastating strikes. We have one strike that I like. You step to the right and you poke the eyes, and then you slam the jaw with an iron palm. And as you come in hip to hip, you just take your arm under their chest and boom, they actually fall down and they fall around your back, and then you kick them with your heel. It happens in less than half a second if you do it right.
Yeah, I'm good. All you Kempo people, stay away from me. I'm a nice guy.
Yeah, and then my sensei started us doing groundwork. So he started bringing like these intense techniques of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, training with Gracie and Matt Cena and all these guys on Long Island that are serious, BJJ practitioners. And honestly, for me, I have short legs and short arms. So there's certain things I can't do. Like if I can get a triangle choke on you, that's good. I'm on the ground. I'm lucky. But you've got broad shoulders, so I had to change my techniques. So my sensei was smart enough to kind of go, okay, you can't do that on him, but you can do a scissor choke. And so a scissor choke is a blood choke, really, as both legs go like this. You pull your leg, you pull the head down, and you choke him. The next thing he does is he'll try to stand up and stack you. Well, I'm ready for a vertical armbar in that move. So I have the wrist, and I have my legs around his neck, and as he's standing up, I'm pulling my hips back.
Yeah.
So you learn multiple moves that only work for me.
Yeah,
they wouldn't work for anybody else.
Yeah.
So in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's one of the few sports where the only way you're going to get better is if you train with good people around you. If someone's better than you, you're just going to be fighting for your life. Yeah. The only way to learn is to train with somebody who's not as good as you, so you get those techniques down. You work on that one technique. My favorite was to start with a lockdown with my opponent's right leg. I would lock it up, okay, which is painful. So the only way to get it out of that is ass in the air, chin to the ground, and shimmy out. And I would keep them from doing that. And slowly, while you're working, because you don't panic, you work, I would get a hold of their other ankle and do an electric chair, which is a split. I got this ankle on this side, and I got the other ankle underneath my armpit, and I roll them over. And that's,
you guys are crazy. That's just not like for me. I'm like,
it's not fun.
I'll just go run 10 miles. How about that? There's no way.
Oh, we used to get marathon runners to the dojo, and I'm not telling you I was good at this. I just enjoyed it.
Right.
I really enjoyed it.
So that's something that kept you young.
Yeah, definitely. And I did it because my nephew Sebastian, he got his black belt at 16, and he said, "Hey, Uncle Brad, why don't you come train with us?" I said, "Sure." And so I started, because I wanted to hang out with him, I helped, raise him as if he was my son. So he actually moved out here. That's part of the reason why I moved to Las Vegas.
Cool.
He used to run the TV station at Fox.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So he and I trained, and then he went off to college, and I just continued with my training.
So were you as you transitioned out of your publicly traded company, K2, your graphic design company.
Yep.
You had to get out because of stress. It was just too much. Like it started to take its toll. You had an opportunity and you took it. So from there, you get your age reversed.
Yeah.
You gotta check. I gotta introduce you to a book by David Sinclair.
Yeah.
I've heard of him.
I would love that.
Books. called Timeless, I think.
Well, here's the weird part. And this will fill in some of your guests who are curious where this is all going, this story. I got $1 million education with K2. But friends started to call me up, and they started to go, Brad, honestly, my nephew, who's a millennial, the term millennial started to come up, Gen Y, whatever. And they said he quit his job because he didn't like how his boss spoke to him. Well, I was dealing with all this stuff at K2. Where I had Gen Xers who were doing very weird stuff. And so I started to become, by accident, like this millennial expert. Somebody at one point called me a millennial whisperer. And I was like, well, because I could walk into a company and they would just run up to me and start complaining about boomers. And I'm like, whoa, I'm a boomer too, you know? They're like, no, you're not, man. Easy. This is why I have this. So I started to realize I would start doing these keynote speeches, and all the boomers would sit in the back of the room going, you know, they needed to be paddled and all this nonsense they were coming up with. And I love millennials, by the way, because they bring us a breath of fresh air in the corporate space. But here's what I discovered. And this is what got everybody to shut the hell up when I got on stage. I would start the program. They would fight when I would originally start. But I said, I got to show them visually right away. So I started pulling out a GAF Viewmaster, which is a self-contained slideshow.
You pulled this out of my kitchen, and I gravitated towards it.
Right, immediately. This is the most interactive toy that a baby boomer grew up with.
And if you ever use one of these, I just used one of these like a couple hours ago, and I was like, it's
addictive.
Yeah, really, I'm like, he's like talking in the kitchen. I'm like,
Yeah. And here's what sucked about it. If the power went out and the lights went out and the sun went down, you couldn't use it because you can't see through it.
Oh.
But whenever I pull this out on stage, you have to see it from my view. Every boomer in the audience turns into a 10-year-old. And they're like, I want to touch that, you know. And it's like, so I show that, and then I pull out this, which is Nintendo 64.
The greatest game console of all time.
Yes, this was the beginning. And so this is why I argue with other generational experts. 1984 is the year that marks a true millennial. And here's why. You up until 77, that's when Star Wars came out and the first gaming consoles. So we were sitting there playing with them. Well, Atari did something stupid. They decided they weren't a gaming company anymore. They were going to compete against IBM. Bad business model. They never recovered. So by 1984, Nintendo, Sega, and Nintendo got into the market with these much better graphics and much better, engines and all this. And so this came out. And so I proved to them on stage, hey, from that moment on, you have a generation that was introduced to the computer coming into the household, which changed our relationship with time and work. So now you could come home and work at home, and now it forced you almost to play at work. Because if you came home and you're working all these ungodly hours and then you have to go back to the office, if the company doesn't give you a little bit of playtime, you're going to go nuts. So before that, I remember this as a kid. No father brought his work home. Nobody had a computer in the house. When dad was home, you mowed the lawn, you had a picnic in the backyard, you barbecued. That was it. And there was no work at home.
Yeah, the work was done at work.
At work.
And it could only be done. I think you described earlier that when you had to bring work home, you had to take a computer home with you.
I had to take the laptop home.
Most dads aren't.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
And here's something that a lot of people don't realize. Something else flipped. And this caused the big generational divide. In most companies, the oldest person at the very top had the most experience, knowledge, and was literally a genius because of age. They had been in that industry for all these years. Well, all of a sudden you had young people who had just been in college and were working with T1 lines, email, and building their own websites, and they were coming into the corporate world, and the corporate world was using old machines. Before that, when you were in college, you weren't using the latest and greatest. You got into the work world, and all of a sudden you're working with the latest technology. You're like, wow, I can't believe I'm working with, a Chiron, which was a device used to put on your television screen. That's how they do the type on your TV.
We'll put. It's probably a black and white picture we can throw up here. All right, we'll put it up here.
The Chiron. Everybody in TV knows what it is, but the graphics and all that, they didn't exist. So we went from analog to digital. And analog means, hey, we're in the real world here, to digital world. You know? And so what started to happen is people were coming out of college and they were looking at all the junk that was in these corporations going, why do I want to work with old technology? And I'll prove something to you. During the dot-com boom, 98% of those companies that were formed during that explosion, of which I was a part of, I'm a boomer, but 98% of those companies that were founded and started back then were started by people who were born around 1977. So if you don't think technology influences our behavior, it does.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I point this out. I did a TED Talk, by the way, where I go through the 9 things you learn in a video game. And basically, once people realize that's the behavior of the millennial generation, then they go, oh my goodness, they've been influenced by video games. And the proof is, I was in drumline in high school. I put the 10,000 hours in to be great at drumming. But my nephew learned how to play a drum set on Rock Band. And he's a better trap set drummer than I am because of it. Video games are training us differently in this modern
It's making
world.
your brain work differently, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I discovered that, and when I went to my wife right around 98, 2000, and around there, I said, what do you think I should do with the rest of my life? Because I was doing all kinds of other things. This is really about 2007, actually.
Okay.
She goes, I think you should write a book about your experience during the dot-com boom and this next generation. And so I started writing about millennials and Gen Xers. And everybody had a little piece of the puzzle, Mason, but they didn't have the whole picture. Because I figured there were 3 big influences. And so I discovered that gaming was probably one of the biggest things to change the brains.
And you made this proclamation in 2007.
The book was finished in 2011 and got published then.
But these ideas of the
started
gaming is changing the way that people
Right.
think and whatnot. That
Exactly.
was coming to fruition in the early 2000s.
Because I kept asking myself, why were my employees so different at K2? Why were they pissing everybody off? Why were they working? Their work habits were like, I've never seen that before. Boomers were taught to obey a hierarchy, and there's a structure.
Sounds like you created a work culture.
Yeah, we won an award for our culture.
Which I think the typical culture before was drinking at the Mad Men culture. If you've ever seen Mad Men, it's this,
That was part of it, but
you know,
those were exceptional people. Usually there's a mass of what they used to teach are just employees, and they should be treated like cattle almost. And we didn't do that. We treated everyone as you were the very best at what you did, and when you opened your mouth, we shut up and listened.
awesome.
So everybody had value, but we were deadline driven. You miss your deadlines, you get fired. So you had to not only be the best, but you had to operate at the A level, game level.
Sure.
And then we had a production manager that was in between to make sure everybody hit their deadlines. That is almost like gaming technology. Everybody is bringing to the table their expertise as a team. Your team is only as good as your weakest link. That person needs to be trained. Everybody's in this together. The hierarchy must be flattened because you're working faster in real time. And also leadership rotates. That's gaming. That's gaming technology right there. That's behavior that's brought out in gaming.
For sure.
And so I pointed this out in my TED Talk, and people's jaws drop. To me, it was hundreds of hours of research. Okay, I flew out to the Games and Learning Society out in Madison, Wisconsin. This is a 4-day event where they take PhDs in academia and they put them together with gaming designers to design games for the classroom. And so imagine taking an economics class where you build a municipality up, through a simulation.
A more educational SimCity.
Yeah, SimCity, exactly. Yeah. So you learn economics, you learn about law, you learn about corporations, what they need and how you can taxation, all this stuff. And so the simulation would teach you all this in the classroom. And I thought at first, when I first heard this, I thought, that's crazy. But I can see it now, because now, instead of waiting to graduate from college and then spending 20 years in an industry, you're coming out of college with the experience from a simulation.
Simulated.
Right, so you're ready to go. And a lot of people don't know this is going on. A lot of boomers have no idea this is the great paradigm shift that took place, that millennials are carrying in their head, a completely different paradigm. And this is why we're so separated right now, because boomers are looking back at millennials, not as much now, but, because they've accepted them and millennials have matured. But what is happening is each generation now is driven by technology, because technology has separated their work habits away from them and the previous generation.
So is this what the focal point? Like, because these are all like very these are early thoughts that I think a lot of companies and ideologies kind of embrace. That embrace now. Like you were kind of the foresetter, like you said.
Yeah.
So is that what inspired you to write this book? Because you said so your wife told you to write this book. Were you tell us about the pieces that you discovered?
Well, what was going on is, first I couldn't figure out what my employees were doing different. Well, why were they thinking different? And I thought it was because they were raised with technology, which I learned I was right. But also they were more international driven and they were thinking differently. Millennials and Gen Xers wanted to have life experiences before certain ages. So age was, landmarks that were derived from age were removed now. When I was young, you didn't smoke a cigar till you were 40. You weren't supposed to go on big vacations till you were in your 40s, and you didn't buy the big house and the big car till you were in your 40s. Now 20-year-olds are doing that.
18-year-olds.
Yeah, 18-year-olds. So there was a huge shift for me that I had to learn. I had to go neutral. I couldn't have an opinion. Like, those kids, look at what they're doing. I couldn't do that. I had to become a reporter in the field. So here was another thing. For years as an entrepreneur, K2 was my fourth business, believe it or not. Excuse me. Before that, when I was about to start K2, I'd already had 3 other businesses. So some of my friends came up to me and they would just tell me I was nuts because I had these management theories that I couldn't test because nobody was listening to me. Everybody went to business school. They treat employees like, well, we can get rid of you. And this is what they used to do. They would hire and fire, hire and fire, hire and fire until you made the compliant culture you wanted from the top down. And I didn't create K2 that way. So when K2 expanded super fast, I realized I would be the one getting in the way of us expanding. All my business partners realized that. We had to let go and let people self-manage themselves. So that's why we were very big on, we would only hire self-starters, people who were conscientious about the work they did, and they had a take no prisoners attitude of how they got the work done. We're crushing this. We're taking the hill, man. Right. Commandos.
People don't understand. There's a way to be like viciously hardworking while not being like a complete asshole at the same time. Like,
totally.
There's a way, and a way to manage in a way like that as well. Like our standards are here. You better hit them.
Well, we would have a big party once a month. It was on a Friday night after 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock. We would hire a local bar and we would just take the upstairs, and first round of drinks were on us and all the food you can eat, so finger foods. And we usually went to 2 places when we were in the smaller office. We went to the Cedar Tavern in University, or we went to Pancho Villa's, which is this great Mexican restaurant in New York City. Viva Pancho's, sorry. And you can tell a Mexican restaurant is good when everybody running the place is Mexican. And
I've worked at a place like that. Yep.
And everybody knew me there because I've been going there for years. They're like, "Hey, Senor Brad," we would have fun. We'd laugh our asses off and get drunk. But we had 2 rules when our employees went to these parties. Number 1, you can't talk with people you work with. You have to cross over and talk to people from other departments and share ideas and share thoughts and come up with new ideas. Well, what happened is we got 4 divisions created at K2 because of employees. One of those divisions we sold for $4 million plus stock swap, and the 2 guys who managed it went with the deal over to another company. They're now CEOs of their own companies now.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so that was one of our big rules. And then when we got bigger and we were in a much bigger space, like 3,000 square feet, what we did is those once a month parties turned into, we had a keg delivered and we would have
sounds like a
15-foot long hoagie. I call them hoagies, sorry, but they're subs, and then our pizza or whatever they wanted.
Right.
And so the same rules applied. It's okay if you gravitate with some of the people you work with, but the rule is, go talk to somebody you don't work with and learn what they do. And so some of the best ideas came out of that. I mean, we had a division that tracked people when they go to a website before they could do this. Like Google can do that. We had an analytics company, as a division of K2, VisitTrack.
Right.
Then we had a media buying company, K2 Net Media. We would buy media for them.
So you were really setting the trend with that.
We had Click Now, which David Setner kind of came up with, and then Scott Paternoster and Joe Apprendi, they all kind of formed that as a separate company within K2. And it was called Click Now. And advertisers would pay for our search engine to find, like, let's say you wanted the top golf, supply stores. They would pay to be brought up in our search engine.
Beautiful.
So we were doing this stuff 20 years ago, and people were kind of like, whoa,
right.
So it was sort of like we were ahead of the time. Then we tried to come up with something that could get information out of people when they click on a banner ad. And we couldn't come up with a better name, but Vampire was one of the names. It was horrible. That was one of our, I told Dave, I go, that is the worst name ever for such a great product.
That's a cool little code name, though.
Yeah, but it was
so those
fun.
Those are one of the fundamentals. So tell us the other fundamentals and let's be a good time to pull this out.
Oh yeah, you got mine.
Oh yeah,
this is liquid leadership.
So this right there. This is liquid leadership. Brad brought this for me.
Yeah.
So what are you said there's 4 puzzle pieces, right?
There's 7 that liquid leaders should live by, but the first 4 are the most important. And these are all my management theories that I had, and this is for entrepreneurs. This allowed us to grow and explode. Okay. I gave my employees the responsibility to run the company. As a matter of fact, the first day they're in, the first principle is people come first. Your people in the front come first. And here's what we would do. First day of orientation, one of the owners, or both of us, me and David, would show up at orientation. Do you know what that does to employees on the first day? They're like, oh my God, the owner of the company, the founder, is here to sit with me. That was the first thing. The second thing we did is David would run a test. He would give out a New York Times, and he would make them go through and look. He goes, there's gold on the first page. What is it? And he would ask them to look differently so that they could see there's business to be had on that page. And then the third thing we did is we would hand out a book that we made everybody read, which was The Pursuit of Wow by Tom Peters. And it talks about what some companies are doing that is extraordinary. Third is we make them watch Jerry Maguire. We actually took our employees to the theater every once in a while. Us as the owners we'd buy the popcorn and hand it all out, and we'd pay for everybody. And that was usually on a 3:00 on a Friday, and they would just leave. There wasn't a late person on Monday morning. Everybody was in at 8:30, which is hard to do in New York City.
It's amazing what happens. You give people a little bit of purpose, a little respect, make them feel appreciated, genuinely.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with you as the owner being the boob once in a while. I would always tell people, hey, I don't know how this works. Tell me. And I would always shock them because a month later I would be like, okay, can we use this technology to bounce off a satellite?
And they're like, I thought you didn't know anything about this.
And they're like, whoa, you get this, man. I'm like, and I still do that to this day.
Yeah.
Explain this to me like I'm 6 years old.
Yeah.
Because my ego's not in this. I want to learn. Okay, so placing people first is number one. So if you have somebody who is one of the best employees you've ever had, throw money at them, give them bonuses, make them. I don't care, because if you lose that person, they prove this. I don't know if you ever watch Undercover Boss. There was a 7-Eleven on Long Island that was pulling in $4 million a year more than all the other ones, and they couldn't figure out why. It's because there was this one woman there that ran the coffee bar in the morning, knew everybody's name, knew their orders, everything, prepped it, kept it clean. She worked her ass off. You throw money at that person. I don't care if they're a low-level employee.
I was like, there's an exception to every rule, and one of the rules is everybody's replaceable. There's an exception to every rule. I think
exactly.
once in a while, like if you would have taken Bezos out of Amazon in 2014, Amazon wouldn't be Amazon. Say what you want, but like some people, and that was a very good example. Are not replaceable.
They are not, and you find that out when you fire your top sales guy, and you can't replace him with anybody else or gal. Because. But the second thing I always found that was really, this is the second principle in the book, and that is You have to create an environment where it's safe to tell the truth. I've been at too many companies when I was rising up in my career where some guy, we were forced to use his technology or his software because his best friend owned the software company and we were playing golf. And what happens is everybody has to do these, workarounds. They're actually called workarounds because the software doesn't work. So the efficiency is dead. So nobody can go up and say, hey, we need to get rid of this software.
Sucks.
Without getting them fired.
Right.
So I'm a firm believer that even if I'm wrong, you have to have the safety to be able to tell me off. And I'm okay with that. And we did create that kind of environment. And it freaked people out sometimes because we had tourist businessmen coming from Japan who would walk around the studio and didn't speak any English. And the interpreter would say, and I would explain. And, one of the biggest questions they always said is, who's in charge? And it's like, well, we have a production manager, but everybody's in charge of their own productivity.
Tesla and SpaceX, or Elon embraces a really certain thing like that, like the information shouldn't flow upward through everyone. It should flow direct to where it needs to go.
Right.
Instead of going up all these different chains, like you said, like it's dumb to go through all that, right? It's inefficient.
The guy, John Chambers, he ran Cisco, and Cisco went from $89 a share to $11 a share back in I think 2000. And he found out, he actually said this, the company was about to die because everything had to go through him. Mm-hmm. He was the bottleneck. So what he did is he gave autonomy to two divisions for buying software and hardware. And one was in charge of $10 billion purchases and above. And then the other was $100 million and below. So he trusted that they'll get the job done. So only the big decisions go through him. And you have to do that. And it's the hardest thing as an entrepreneur. You're at that point where you have to hire your first employee. That's the freak out moment. Because you have to trust that the money's going to come in.
Yeah.
You have to trust that your accountant is going to catch it, and now you got to call ADP. You got to, all right, here are the books for Friday, and so you have to trust in that. And that's the hardest moment for almost any entrepreneur in the world, is that moment where you have to let go and let the company be its own entity.
When you start to figure it out, it's really empowering, though, to let go of that power.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I feel is incredibly important, especially for a design firm, is you have to create an environment where creativity is number one. And I always say this, without a truth-telling environment, without the ability to be creative, there is no innovation. There will never be innovation if you don't give employees the freedom to innovate and be creative and come up with a dumb idea. Some of these things have to incubate before they're able to even become anything.
Some of the best ideas I've had come from dumb. I'll say a line and someone's like, "Oh, we could do something with that." What you got here? Looks like you're pulling something.
I wanted to read a paragraph, but I start the book. We have to, my fourth, and this is the fourth one that is really actually incredibly important. You have to support the reinvention of the organization, because in this day and age, guess what happens? You might start out as a traditional whatever, and then because of technology, you're going to have to change everything. You're just going to have to, because the technology will destroy it. There's a funny chapter, if I can find it real quick.
Yeah, no.
I named my chapters after Rush songs and TV shows.
All right, cool.
I had a Farewell to King, Farewell to Kings in here. But I do start it out with the Bruce Lee quote. This is actually my favorite.
Okay, cool.
Bruce Lee quote. Let me.
Let's hear it.
It's the one about water.
I'm so excited to read this.
Oh, you're gonna have it.
And this is available on Amazon, yeah.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
And here's the funny part. I was exhausted after writing this. There's 307 pages here. And my wife says, you need one more chapter that's the credo of a liquid leader. And I said, I'm exhausted. I can't do it anymore. And she goes, no, you need this, the 7 principles. So I wrote those 7 principles. And guess what? My publisher said, that's the whole book right there.
Wow.
Okay. Here it is. I think it is. Oh, this is actually a different quote. But the Bruce Lee quote I love is become like water. When water is in a glass, it becomes the glass. When water is in, a bowl, it becomes the bowl. Mm-hmm. Be water, my friend. And that's the whole idea of liquid leadership. It is, you have to adapt. to what's happening in the outside world. Because when I was first introduced to the internet, I had no idea what the hell it was. I'm just like sitting there going, it's none of those things, and yet it's all these things. And so I had to just let go and basically say, you know what? I know nothing. I really don't. I don't know a damn thing.
The internet was just an idea, and really.
Yeah. But I cover a lot of things in here. Like, one of my favorite things to cover was this. In Future Shock, Alvin Toffler, he did an analysis of what the future would be. And basically what he said is, and he called this Future Shock because there's something called culture shock. When you travel to another country and you're
another state.
Yeah. And
seriously,
let's say you go to Italy and you're there as an American for 4 days, you start to actually feel like, okay, I need a cheeseburger. You know, even as much as the food is like off the hook, and then you're not hearing anybody speak English for a couple of days, you start to go into sort of a withdrawal, you know, like a spaceman without a cord. And so he called this thing that was about to happen, where technology would move so fast, we would be unhinged from tradition. And as you would go into this, it would be like going into a new world that you have no way of planting yourself.
Right.
But here's the difference. You can't go home in this new world. So he called it future shock, not culture shock. Yeah. And he said a new generation would rise up that would have no connection to the past. They would be disrespectful. They would be doing all this, and they would be using technology, and they would throw things away. They wouldn't keep like the previous generation.
Shout out millennials.
Yeah. And so he didn't even know millennials were going to exist, because he wrote this book like in the 70s. And so I quote that a little bit in the beginning. And he said something that I like to end all my keynotes with, and that is, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn.
That is a quote right there.
Yeah. And that is like one of the best things. And then I have a chapter where I talk about the farewell to kings. And that is about how the CEO is no longer the smartest guy at the top of the food chain. It's usually your bottom line, front line worker. And Harley Davidson was smart enough to know this. When they got together and bought back Harley Davidson from AMF, they basically put into place, because people were complaining that the bikes were coming apart, they were dangerous, they would fall apart on the highway, for God's sake. So what they did is they decided that the frontline workers would be given power and autonomy to stop the line if there was a problem. And then the second thing they did is they had just-in-time ordering. See, in the past, you would have a warehouse with hundreds of thousands of parts. You had to heat it and air condition it. And they got rid of that. Instead, they used the Edward Deming model from Japan, which is you order just in time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you surround yourself with suppliers.
Yeah. So this kind of change that's been taking place, I talk about more in the book. Like, you have to take responsibility for your actions as a leader.
Right.
You have to create a legacy that will continue long after you're dead. And I cite some of those. But it literally was, I would never consider myself a writer before this, or an author.
Right.
But it's like doing 100 essays and getting them right. And here's the thing. I wrote the whole book by myself, and then hired an editor to get the stories correct and get everything in the right order. And in the middle of this, I felt like I was in the middle of the ocean and I couldn't see the shoreline. I was sort of like freaking out.
Right.
But the stories were important. I wanted to write a different kind of business book, a book that embraced how I grew up as a kid amongst farmers and amongst simple, ideas in business, and then how that translates into the modern management theories that I have proven work. We won the Arthur Anderson Award for fostering innovation amongst our employees, and that award made all the difference.
So would you say that you enjoyed writing this book then?
I actually did, because I think I told you this, I was in stand-up comedy for a little while.
Yeah.
And what happened is I started to write sitcoms, and I started to write, and I stopped. And this is advice for anybody who wants to write a book. You have to not write your book as if you're trying to get an A from your teacher. From your, a lot of people write as if they're going to get an A. Did you put a stopper in front of that so it doesn't go down?
Yeah, sure. I got it.
Put a little stuff. There we go. But you have to write your book. A lot of people write as if they're college English professors standing right over their shoulder.
Okay.
And they use big $10 words like, theoretically from a hypothetical point of view.
So you're an author, right?
Right, yeah.
Right?
And I don't write like that. I write the way I speak, except I remove some of the swear words. And my publisher removed all my humor, which pissed me off. I was like, how dare you?
I like when you can read someone's work, like especially if you know them and you can hear their tone in the way that's written. I'm like, this is...
Like there's a line in there, and I talk about some touchy-feely subjects in there, and I said, I know this sounds like granola eating, Birkenstock wearing, crystal wearing people from the West Coast, and I apologize to anybody who wears Birkenstocks
or
eats granola or uses crystals. I said, but this is something we have to address because we're returning to sort of this age of humanity. I think the great thing that millennials bring to the table, Gen X millennials and the new generation Gen Z, what they bring to the table is we're bringing humanity back into the workforce. I don't know if it was ever there, but the business model and the production model we used is actually a 100-year-old model that graphic design and advertising agencies always used. It's just now we're adding a little more of the touchy-feely stuff. People can have relaxed work environments, virtual work environments. Now we're on Zoom. This is Zoom's moment.
Yeah, it used to be real uppity, like I'm at work, right? And now it's more like
I'm at work.
We're sweat. Like Google's whole thing is like, come here and whatever, and get your ish done.
Well, here's the big argument that I get with a lot of these older guys who have been, they went through the traditional, business school, and the reality is they've been taught a lot of nonsense because 95%, I did the math on this, I could be wrong, 95% of the professors who teach business at college, the gurus that wrote books, the people who tell you and give you advice, none of them have owned a business.
Yeah, otherwise they'd be doing that business.
Yeah. One of the top business books that came out, I think, in 2010 was written by a Harvard professor, and in the first, God bless him, but in the first 15 pages he says, "I've never owned a business." And I said, "Thank you for being honest." And I put the book on a shelf.
I've taken a couple of classes in college and stuff that were like entrepreneurial based, and like I was like, and they weren't entrepreneurs, they were just and I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, wow, what?
Well, this is what bothers me, and anybody who's listening who's an entrepreneur, you probably have seen this, but I had a friend of mine who was hired to teach a class on entrepreneurship, and he started, the kids were excited, and he's owned like dozens of businesses and very successful, and they went back to the professor, and the professor says, if he starts a business like that, it'll never survive, and they came back and told him what the professor said, and he goes, and how many businesses did your professor own and operate? And it's 0. So he said, maybe you want to listen to me because they're textbook savvy. But I had to several times I was a judge for a high school or college business plan.
Okay, contest
competition.
Deal.
Yeah. So I've done that a couple of times, and I've keynoted them as well. But about the third or fourth one, they have a CFO, a CEO, and a CMO, and all this. These are the C-suite guys: Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer. And finally, I go, whoa, 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 whoa. I go, no one starts out a business, even if you're well financed, with a CFO, a CMO, First, create a product that sells or a service that sells.
Come up with an idea.
Do that first. Get through the $1 million barrier, because that first year at K2, I think we generated maybe $350,000. I'll have to double check. That's not a lot of money after expenses for us to take home any money. Once in a while, we'd have a $400 check, and that's like $1,200 in today's money. And we were struggling. We bootstrapped the whole operation. Once we broke through $1 million, our accountant actually came over. We were so busy. Our accountant walked up to us and he came by the office and he had this big smug grin on his face. We're like, what? We're in the middle of a project, and he goes, you guys just did $1.4 million. We're like, what? And Doug, if you knew Doug Cleek, he'll probably watch this. I'm going to show this to him.
Shout out Doug.
Yeah, what's up, Doug? And Doug just looked at me and the way he laughs is hysterical. He's like, woo,
and Doug,
like this.
Doug was the fiance of the girl Who ended up
No,
being like
that's
ultimate
David.
salesman? Oh, that's David. Okay.
Doug and I went to college together at
okay.
the Art Institute
Mixed
of
up my
Pittsburgh.
Ds.
Yeah, we were at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. Doug and I, Doug is a farm boy just like me, so we were kind of like, we had that same work ethic,
Right.
graphic design. And we used to argue in the beginning because we were like two roosters in a hen house. It's like, who's the territory? We came from different disciplines. But this is what I learned about business partners. There's nothing wrong with arguing and having dynamic tension if at the end of the day you want to create the very best product.
If you're arguing out of passion and for the right reasons, not to get your way.
Right.
Because you want the right way, not your way.
Right. And here's the thing. You can't have similar skill sets because you're paddling in the same direction. You'll just go in. So you have to have opposite skill sets, and then you have to be honest about what's missing. So what was missing from us was the business savvy. We knew how to run a design firm. We knew how to do sales and pitch, but how do you fish? And that's where David came in. David became the rainmaker. So you need a rainmaker a lot of times. So most people, they start a business based on their skill and their talent. Am I right? Most of them are an interest in something.
Sure.
But they know nothing about the business side of this. So, like you and I, we met at Savor, the coffee shop. I'm watching how they're doing things. And once in a while, Mike and Alexis ask me, hey, what would you do different? And I'd say, try this, do that. Like the summer's coming. I said, you need refreshers. You need 3 refreshers that are ice-driven. You shake them. You make it very dramatic. People are like, we got to get a refresher because we're right across the street from the park.
Yeah.
So you need a lemonade, a pink lemonade one. You need this, all refreshers. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. So you have to understand customer business, and you have to be right at the cutting edge of the opportunity. But you got to get the word out. So
Right.
There's only 3 parts in business you need to know. First is sales and marketing, okay? And then internal is management. So a lot of people don't realize that what marketing is. They really don't. But I don't mean to be crass, but marketing in today's language or parlance is romance. Okay, if you want to go out with somebody, you have to romance them. You have to let them know. So they know who you are before you go on that first date, okay? So romance marketing. And by the way, advertising now comes under marketing. And so you look at that and you're like, wow, that's really brilliant. Because when you go on a sales call or you go anywhere, if somebody walks into your shop, they better know about you before they enter. That's romance.
Right.
That's romance. In high school, we all had that reputation, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knew who you were. You were either the jock or the drummer right, exactly.
Before you even got in the relationship.
Yeah.
He's the guy, the cheerleader.
Right, the cheerleader, the guy with great hair, the guy with the sense of humor. So you had all that. So we know that before. Now, what is sales? Sales is copulation. Now, if you want to be in a long-term relationship, anybody who's been married knows this, if you want more of the copulation, you got to have more of the romance.
Right.
So that's business 101 nowadays for your outer market. Now, if you have problems with supply, you have problems with employees, that's internal. That's a management of what's going on internally. So those are the only 3 things you really have to worry about. Marketing and sales, they go hand in hand because what if your website's down? What if your ordering engine is on your website?
Right.
How do you get people to your website? Well, those are all sales and marketing questions.
Right. And you cover all this in Liquid Leadership too?
No, this is all most of the management stuff. But when it comes to doing a mastermind or a program or somebody, wants me to coach them, these are the kind of things I lay down. I kind of go, hey, look, this is what you need to do. People don't know who the hell your business is. A lot of times people build a website and they're like, I got that done. Nailed it.
Right.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
And is your website interactive? Hershey called me in. And the reason they called me in is I went to high school with their IT, head of their IT department. Julie called me in. She goes, we got problems. I go, what do you got problems? So I brought one of my design firms in, Lounge Lizard, my buddy Ken Braun. We drove all the way down to Pennsylvania. And we're sitting there with their team. And the first thing I said was, you have everything on your website. They're like, yeah. I said, you have your mints on there. You have your gourmet chocolate. You have the candies you give. I said, you need to break that up. First of all, why are breath mints on the Hershey site? You need your own separate brand. And they were kind of like sitting there going, well, what are we doing wrong? I said, your website's incredible. I said, it's one of the best websites I've ever seen. It's interactive, all that. But you just put a V8 engine on a Schwinn bicycle. I said, you have no interactivity on your website. There's no interaction. It's a brochure. And because their main question is, why aren't people coming back to our website? I said, what do you do when you read a brochure? You jot down the phone number and you throw it in the garbage. I said, that's exactly what's happening. You have an incredible website with videos and all that. I suggest you have father-daughter or father-mother or mother-daughter time where they have a competition where they use Nestle products to create cookies or maybe, different products. You have a competition. They win the competition. Whoever wins gets taken to Hershey Park. They get flown in. They take care of it.
That's cool.
You keep these kind of things cycling over
Right.
that. Your gourmet chocolate that's only being used by chefs needs a completely separate website. And I said, because they don't even know that you create this gourmet chocolate that's used for like mole sauce or that's used by the top chefs in New York City. I said, that should be separate and you should have chefs showing their best recipes on there in videos.
Right,
I said, you got to make this like an interactive competition. You have to have all this content has to be as interactive as possible, and it has to be uploaded every couple of weeks. You got to constantly, if not every day, every week.
Right.
And then the mints. I mean, it was literally chocolate, mints. I said, get the mints out of there.
Yeah, it's insane with like a company that large. Like you would think they totally got their ish together, has their own team. But I think it almost goes back to like a coach needs a coach. A big business needs help too.
Well, look at it this way. Okay, I'm working with somebody right now who's helping me redo my brand. Okay. She's looking at me, Tao, a good friend of mine. She's Vietnamese American, and so she has this eye for like structure, systems and all this other stuff. And she's helping to reconstitute a lot of what I've done already. And because her mindset, she like sees it, she's into it.
Right.
I shut up and listen. Because I'm going to tell you right now, you can't do your own marketing. I'm living proof of that because I'm good at marketing. And literally, if you sat down and you gave me a problem, I would just sit here and go, okay, here's your tagline. Boom.
Yeah,
and it would come out of my mouth and you'd go, wow, that's genius. Try to do that for yourself.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, okay. Let's use that as a stopping point because I want to dig into this book.
Okay.
And I want to learn. I want to bring you back in 100 episodes. Will you come back in 100 episodes?
I would love to come back.
Because I want to talk more about this book. I want to talk more about Firestarter that's coming out. When is that going to come out?
Give me a year. I'm working on it, and it's going to be starting out as video content before that. I also have a Facebook private group. It's about to go private.
Give us the run. If big company out there needs some help coaching, entrepreneurs, keynote speaking, do you still do all that? Or available?
Yeah.
Like, give us the rundown, the spiel. How do we get a hold of you?
Just
give me the whole thing.
Do a Google search for me. You'll find my website. Just Google Liquid Leadership. You'll find my website right there.
Yep.
Liquidleadership.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram. Brad Szollose. Also, my podcast is Awaken Nation.
Awaken Nation, super cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's the first episode that you sent me actually. He has the founder of Uggs.
Yeah.
Which I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but like when I read it, or when I think you actually said it, you were like, "This is going to be a great show for all the women," and he kind of laughed because I think he knew it was actually not. Like in a weird, like he was like, wait till you hear these stories. Like,
right.
It's not what it's not a women's boot brand, which is how we think about it now.
Yeah.
Anyway, his podcast is awesome.
Thank you.
Check it out. We're going to check out Liquid Leadership. We're going to we'll put all of your links here below as well.
But here's the thing about Awaken Nation. Everybody kept asking me to be to do my own podcast.
Yeah.
And I had been on probably almost 100 as a host or a guest.
Right.
And the late Tom Cunningham, who was like an internationally known motivational speaker, he asked me to be a co-host on several of his shows on the Journeys to Success program.
Okay, yeah.
So I interviewed Bruce Buffer, the ring announcer from UFC.
Yeah.
I've interviewed, Brian from Brian Smith of Uggs. And I realized, I said to myself, I didn't want to have that traditional business show where, how successful I am? I'll tell you how.
Turns into like a lecture flex session.
Yeah. And I've had so many failures in my own life. We didn't even talk about that.
No, we're going to maybe we'll bring you back in 50 episodes.
Yeah, there you go. And I just actually sat there and I said to myself, I want a show where people have been changed. They've been knocked on their ass. They've been knocked down spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, or financially. And when they got back up, they said to themselves, I can't live my life like this anymore. I have to change the way I live life. So I had Dove Barron on. Dove was in season 1. He fell off a cliff because he was an extreme sport junkie, and he fell 120 feet. He should have died, but he lived, broke every bone in his body, and walked out of the forest to a helicopter, crew. They flew him. He's had 100 corrective surgeries. I've had people like that on. Damian Ross was on. He suffers from severe depression. So he got in an RV, and he had to give himself a passionate mission, and that is 1,000 days of videos, one video a day for 1,000 days. And he talks about being depressed as a man, which a lot of guys don't want to talk about. I had on a woman who claims to have been abducted by UFOs and has the MRI scans.
What's that? I haven't heard that one. Which one is it? What's her name?
Geraldine Orozco.
That's the next one I'm listening to.
And that's one of our most controversial episodes. But what happened with her is her uncle was her gynecologist, and he's the one who did the sonic scan, and she was pregnant, and then suddenly the baby's missing. And now you're rolling your eyes when you hear this one, but here's the most powerful part about this show. She started to talk about meditation and going into the 5th dimension of the matrix that we live in. And I had more people reaching out to me after that episode to say, thank you. I can't believe what I just learned, because I've been meditating for 30 years and now I know what to do. And I was like, oh man, it was like, so I have guests on. I don't sit there and have an opinion. Yeah. I just kind of pull out everything.
Well, check it out. You're available on, I know you're on Apple Podcasts. What other platforms are you on?
We're on Stitcher as well.
Okay.
Spotify.
Cool.
We're also on Anchor.
Also, everything will be right down here.
Yeah, we'll give you the links.
Well, hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm not trying to rush this last 30 seconds, but my memory card's running out. Brad, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mason. Good job. Thanks, everybody.